Hi, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Moonbeaming, a podcast for going deep, for integrating the unseen with the seen, the material world, so that we can navigate this thing called life together in the best possible ways with the best possible outcomes. And here we do this through depth psychology, creativity, intuition, energy work, archetypes, intersectional feminism, cosmic connections, pop culture, nature, and more. If any of this is interesting to you and you're new here, welcome. I also always suggest that you can play Oracle Scroll if you're new here and just go back down the feed and land on an episode title that calls to you. And there's probably some nugget of wisdom or something of interest to be there for you. My goal with this podcast is to create timeless episodes and conversations with people. So you can try that. And if you've been here for a while, thanks so much for being here. I love you. And thank you for the support. Thank you for your attention. It is truly an honor and a pleasure, right? Because if it's not pleasurable, why are we doing it? I do this because it's fun. All right. We have a very fun episode. Today, it is a teaching episode. This is where I do a deep dive on a topic. It's like a mini workshop. Today, we're diving deep into the Seven of Wands in the minor arcana of the tarot. This is because we're in a 7-year, and a lot of the themes of the sevens are just a touch bit loud. Also, it is now fire season. Hello, tropical Leo. And this card corresponds to fire. The wands correspond to fire. So if you're ready to go deep with this archetype, much deeper than a little Google, this is for you. I think of my teaching style as like a tree. I'm giving you the foundations, and they go off in these rhizomatic mushroom mycelial webs, and you can follow along. And then if you want to go deeper, or if that sparks something in you, yes, that is what I want. I really think we are done with the more OG traditional style of psychic arts, mystical arts, where you pull a card or you hang out with a planet and there's just one keyword and that's the meaning. That's not really where we are anymore, right? We are in a conversation with, we are in a relationship with, and I think it's really important to know the history, to know the tradition, to understand the system that it functions in, and then extend it and evolve it. And so that's what we're doing here today. This is if you want to get into all of the roots, the branches, the leaves, the sap, if you want to view these archetypes in a different way, really as a way to live the tarot and connect to the archetypes as a living system, and for tools that we all need to navigate the unsanity of this world. You know, you like that? It's so completely unsane right now, you know? And tarot can help us do that. That's why I love it. Can help us see larger truths, spiritual or not, can help us hone our intuition and tune into our intuition, be aware of our personal shortcomings or challenges, and can help us make changes that will be in service to our growth and to the collective growth as well. right? Okay, let's get started on our friend, the Seven of Wands. So let's all get on the same page. Start with the basics. We know that the wands correspond to fire. Fire is energy. It's the spirit. It is life and life force, creativity, action taking. It's the personality, our personalities, our identities, where and how we shine, what we like to do, what fuels us, what defines us, what gives us energy. It's about motivation and ambition. And that life piece, that energy piece also connects to sex and sexuality, what attracts you, what is attractive to you, how you attract. Just to clarify, not necessarily only sexually, but just what makes you stop and go, oh yeah, maybe it's an ice cream sandwich, right? That's sometimes what makes me stop, or a really beautiful hummingbird or a tree, I haven't heard anyone else say this, but to me, hanging out with the wands, there's like this comedic, blustery element sometimes to certain wands cards, or perhaps a performative or performance-based element. I used to be a tarot reader and I live in LA. And without fail, whenever I was reading for someone really in the industry, really in the biz, no one calls it that. It's just me acting as if I'm living in 1921, but I'm not. But maybe part of me is. Who knows? Time, holograms. It's all an illusion. Multiverse. Anyway, without fail, their spreads would be filled with wands cards. I very much think of wands and fire as being correlated with these very fast-paced industries where there can be a lot of conflict, there can be a lot of ego, there can be a lot of visionary energy, a ton of creativity. We know that wands correlates very much with unique creative expression, right? We also know that the Seven of Wands traditionally relates to a decan of Leo. And what can be here as well can be like, what are you doing for show and what is authentic? So to add on to this with the Seven of Wands, the basics of this card, we have overcoming, victory, rising up, perseverance. I sometimes see the Seven of Wands as being able to access a really great activist energy, like fighting against the system or fighting for the underdog. There's this punk rock energy that I also don't really hear folks talk about with this card, so I'm going to say it, yeah. The Seven of Wands, Kimmy Birdie Punk, bucking the system, going against the norm, going against the grain, fighting for what is right, or fighting for your integrity when you are in a setting where your integrity is perhaps being questioned or compromised. Duh. I felt like Oprah right there. Is it compromise or compromised? Duh. The Seven of Wands can be a card about making yourself known, making yourself seen, like feeling like you have this spark within and thinking about how you can bring that spark out to make it visible so you can enjoy it and other people can see it. It can also be about a process of gaining more confidence. When the Seven of Wands comes up, you could be entering into a period where you are thinking, well, what about me? How do I differentiate myself? You see that in the progression from the Four of Wands to the Six, which is this beautiful process of belonging, of coming into a fold, of being with others, learning from them, feeling welcomed, developing some kind of individual stance, stepping away from the crowd, and learning how to figure out what you think. Like learning how to think for yourself and also how to be for yourself. And it's not that we don't need people. We all need people. We thrive, we survive in relationships and in community. This card is about attracting others from a more authentic space, not from a space of lack or shoulds or desperation or wanting to fit in, but from a space of being who you are or being an authentic version of yourself, however that looks for you, so that you might connect with those who resonate with your heart and your specific energy. So if your outsides are not matching your insides, and you need to spend more time on that cultivation, this is your card. I often, from my, again, just my interpretation from my experience with the wands, I often see that in the wands, some of our transformation, or most of it, or much of it, comes from interacting in the world, going out into the world and making external changes that then transform our insides. So it won't be uncommon for me to recommend someone pulling a bunch of wands and they're in an identity crisis or they're not sure what to do, to like switch up their house, go through their closet, join an improv group, meet new friends, go out into the world, learn, explore, engage. Sometimes we just have to get it moving. You know, we can't be sitting on our cushion alone. Yes, transformation from the inside out. Yes, reflection, 100%. But we're in wands. We're in wands, baby. You know, we're not in water. We're not in air, even earth. Like wands is the place where you're like, you know what? Nothing to it but to do it. I'm going to start that garden. I'm going to join that activist group. I'm going to ask that person out on a date. I'm going to make that book proposal, you know, and you learn through action. You learn through doing. That's a very wands energy to me. So when one gets this card, you can ask, what do I stand for? What am I willing to go after and use my energy for? How do I get motivated and move forward? Am I putting my energy in the right places? How can I cultivate more life force currently? How can I tap into my creativity, my gifts, my skills, my energy in the best possible updated current time way? And what am I willing to do differently in that regard? You know, because this card, as we know, potentially is about conflict, right? Are we going to speak up, even though it might rile certain people? When do I let others struggle? When do I help? How long do I struggle with something before I give up or take a break? Is there a simpler or easier way? Like, what am I in resistance to? And of course, the not so cute aspects of this card include, but are not limited to, defensiveness, ego battles, jealousy, competition, like unhealthy competition. Sometimes this has come up as a frenemy or people in your circle simply not supporting your growth. And we want to be really clear. Often this is just about unconscious behavior. Maybe they're not supporting your growth because they can't see you. Maybe they're not supporting your growth because you're not being clear about what you want, or you're not growing, Or maybe there are folks around us that are enabling us in old habits, keeping us trapped in old identities, right? If you have family members who are always insinuating something inaccurate or negative about you, right? And treat you in a certain way or diminish your growth, refuse to see your growth, refuse to adapt to different dynamics that are healthier or updated, that can keep us stuck in other ways that we might not even be aware of. It can be incredibly draining. It can also cause this inner conflict of lack of resolution. Like, wait a minute, I stopped doing drugs 15 years ago. Now I have a family of my own. I have 2 kids. They're wonderful. Now I rescue kittens in my spare time. Like, can we please come into present time? It's sometimes about being in conflict with present time. I also think of, this is vaguely related, not a great segue, but this just popped into my head. I think about microaggressions, but very real aggressions like racism, transphobia with this card. I am thinking of that Toni Morrison quote. I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not going to look it up, but you can look it up. It's a very famous quote of hers that says about whiteness, if you only have worth if someone else is on their knees, what does that say about you? Or how good are you? Or what does that say about your identity? So you could be in a situation where you're having to deal with entitlement, some aggressions, projections that doesn't have to do with you, or you're unconsciously comparing yourself to someone else, or you're caught up in that hierarchical compare, despair hamster wheel that white supremacy loves to perpetuate, right? It's how they hold onto their power. Of course, this also makes me think of, what do we do emotionally with all of this? These fiery emotions like rage, sacred rage, anger, and when it's useful and generative and when it's not, meaning when it drains us. Mr. Andrew Huberman was saying in one of his podcast episodes that a lot of anger and a negative focus on others is inversely related to one's deep sense of agency. Feeling like you don't have control, controlling things too much or trying to control things too much, it's a cover-up for insecurity. Jealousy, envy, all comes up. Listen, I could do a whole topic on any of these themes, but this might be your wake-up call to dig into that envy or that insecurity. Hello, 7 of Wands, she's in the room. I think of the meme of the therapist being like, okay, is this social media? Are they in the room with us now? Like I've said a lot of times with friends, yeah, like even in the room now, misogyny is here. We're all women in this room, or we're all queer, we're all intersectional feminists, but like the patriarchy is in this room right now, so you can ask yourself, is this envy in the room with us right now? Is this 7 of Wands in the room with us right now? Because of course they are. It's the 7 of Wands, honey. The other thing I think of that is the branch off of really intense emotions is this idea that was presented to me by Pete Walker in his book, CPTSD. And that's this idea of survivors and armoring. It's this idea that when people have been bracing themselves for so long, right? Because they've had to, or their nervous system has been in a state for an extended period of time, the body gets really rigid and it armors. And I think about that too with this card, this bracing, this armoring. And sometimes this card really simply, if nothing else, can be a gentle ask to soften, to look to see where you're holding, where you're holding your breath, where you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, where you're creating a posture in your body that might be painful and might be rigid. So maybe pause this episode and just take a nice deep breath and stretch your body and be like seaweed and move your hips and soften your belly and gently and softly expand. If you hear me in my chair, I'm doing it right now. For about 97 years, which is about how long I've been reading the cards. Just kidding. But it feels like that long sometimes. For a long time, I've been calling the Seven of Wands the don't read the comments card, AKA, where is your energy going? How is your energy getting drained? And also, where are you doing things that are below your proverbial pay grade? There's this major leveling up available in all the sevens. Major. Look at the eights. The eights are big deal. Big deal energy. So what do you need to do to prepare for that? Maybe you have to stop letting the peanut gallery bother you, literal and or in your head. Maybe it's time to drop that compare and despair and move into collaboration, or just like mind your business more, quite frankly, like really sink into your life, right? Really fill yourself up with your energy. Your greatest success might come when you stop looking at who is doing what and when you focus on what you are here to do. Other people aren't necessarily your competition. I have another theory that tracks with this card. Can I share it? I'm laughing to myself because I know some of you are like, oh, I'm loving all of her shares. And some of you are like, this is a lot. Yeah, welcome to being a tarot reader, right? But I have another theory with this card. I work with a lot of highly sensitives. I am highly sensitive. And I've noticed it's truly a challenge, or at times it can be difficult for highly sensitives and, of course, survivors to focus on themselves completely. There's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to unpack all of them. But one is because we've learned at that early age, that 0 through 7 age, that we must be vigilant. There's this hyper vigilance that gets ingrained where we can't always let our guard down to focus on ourselves. That includes doing energy work on ourselves, like really sinking into focused time, focused awareness. And again, moving on from that armoring piece, I see the Seven of Wands as this real insistence to soften, focus on yourself first, beloved. Like it's this reminder you are safe because you're ready to learn the tools or practice ways of being safe in yourself and in your body. You are safe now. You can use your attention and your life force and your energy differently now. You can invest in yourself. It's also asking us, a lot of the sevens ask us, do the comfort zones we're in, especially the ones we can control, our nervous system stuff, energy stuff, our thoughts, our emotions, our breath, these comfort zones, meaning just these realms we found ourselves in for long periods of time that aren't necessarily serving us ultimately, do we even want them? Did we even choose them? So you can ask yourself when this card comes up, does it make sense for me to stay in a comfort zone? Am I uncomfortable in a way that truly is not good for me? Moving right along to my Rolodex of plants, am I a cactus that has been planted in a rainforest and it's just not going to work for me? Or is it time for me to stretch outside of my comfort zone? Or how can I get more comfortable in a way that's going to be healthy for me, right? Last but not least, and of course, these are all my interpretations based off my own practice and theories, but we have this evidence with Seven of Wands of spiritual growth. We have found ourselves in a big, old spiritual growth spurt. A lot of people this year are having spiritual growth spurts. I shared that one of the themes this year is movement, trips, and travel. That could mean spiritual journeys, literal journeys, deep journeys inside, like psychedelic journeys, and so forth. And if that's you, you're right on time for the Chariot year. Receiving downloads, maybe starting to hear your intuition more. Maybe you're seeing the results of certain practices. This could all be happening for you this year. And of course, it comes with consequences, right? That big old spiritual growth spurt you've got may have you needing to distance yourself in some ways from your old life, from certain people. I suggest you listen to the Tower episode and the wonderful episode with Jeff Kober, if that is tracking for you. It also leads to spiritual growing pains, where you might be thinking, oh, this pop astrology, it's not doing it for me anymore. I need to take a Vedic astrology class with a practitioner of 30 years, right? I want to go deeper. Or maybe it's time to stop reading Kabbalah for dummies and start digging into the Zohar, right? So you can just think about where you want to go deeper and where you want to integrate and implement certain wisdoms, teachings in your life, right? And we could be here with that one forever. But the last spiritual growth piece I wanted to share here, it could be spiritual growth that doesn't look like it, or spiritual growth that we don't really want. You're like, well, not like this. I want my spiritual growth to be really beautiful and pastel colored, not gnarly, brambly, rawr, A spiritual growth spurt that doesn't look like one is really being in this muck of life, going through a breakup, having the rug being pulled out from under you, having certain things fall apart, confusion, groundlessness. Ideally, we want our spiritual growth to come from joy and bliss and nature and learning and heart-opening practices. And hopefully it will. And hopefully it does. I'm definitely reorienting towards that. And often, sometimes it comes through hard times, but even just mundane times, like boredom, you're just kind of bored and you don't know what to do next. So if this is tracking for you, think about where you might be in a growth period. Doesn't even have to be spiritual, right? It could just be growth, inner growth, outer growth. It's happening, or there's the opportunity for one, and you might be resisting it simply because it doesn't look like how you would prefer, or you can't see it. I promise you, if you pay attention, you can get a big aha in the produce aisle. or tying your kid's shoes or walking your dog if you're aware, mindful, and paying attention. I promise. In my own practice, the sevens are what I call the sacred pause. I did a whole episode on the sevens, the themes and concepts of the sevens. You can go back and listen. And I don't think I presented my sacred pause idea. It's a concept I started teaching about the sevens, I don't know, over a decade ago. And then I was like, how come you didn't spend time on the sacred pause? It was like one of the biggest uncoverings you had about the sevens that helped you. So there was a pause there, a nice long sacred one. So why are the sevens the sacred pause? And why can that remembering that, why can knowing that be so important when you get a minor seven or when you're in a seven phase? In one of my last energy sessions with my patrons, and I think even with Embodying Abundance folks, I shared about how we've been programmed to deal with life with bids for connection, or when we have places to relate more deeply or being in the present moment and asked to really be more present. Often, because we've learned this way of relating or reacting, we'll either override or avoid. We'll stay in our comfort zone. We'll either be in fight or freeze when we're asked to deal with the present moment or a bid for connection or a bid for intimacy. I believe the idea, the name, sacred pause, I heard first by the legendary legend, Tara Brach. And this is an idea of simply being with, being in observation, not needing to override, avoid, speak, fix, resist, talk over, interrupt, make something into a problem, get dragged into a story, have our self-saboteur take over. But just pause. Just become neutral. Observe. The other famous quote around this subject, I cite it and quote it all the time in my longer classes, is one from Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. The reason why the sevens are the sacred pause is that what is happening when we pull a seven is that something in our life is asking us to respond, not react. And so often when we pull a seven, it might look like nothing really is happening. But something is happening that would usually have us go into reaction mode, unconscious mode, fixer mode, avoidance mode, whatever our modes are, right? Many modes. That's what I'm going to change my branding to. Just kidding. Our old habits come up, our ingrained nervous system responses, even certain old personality traits that aren't even ours, right? Those aspects of our personality that are a coping mechanism or nervous system response. All of them want to come rushing out in reaction to some external event, some stimulus, some cue. And it doesn't have to be major. It can be, I don't know, a friend, canceling plans because they got sick. So they're like, hey, I can't make it. I got sick. Don't want to get you sick. Sorry. Maybe that triggers some old story about not being worth anyone's time, or some old belief that everyone will bail on you. And I think, of course, of the correlation between the number 7 and our development. A lot of behavioral psychologists say that the events that happen between 0 and 7 can be the most impactful in terms of what we believe about ourselves in the world. I also would add on to that, I believe it's our formative experiences we've had around the big topics, like our first job or first jobs, or our first very serious relationship, or our first shared housing situation. Those start to set up an energetic baseline, which then creates a literal one, right? Like, so again, another quick example to bring this into IRL. One of the reasons I think I made so little money for so much of my life is that my first jobs were being a waitress at a Greasy Spoon diner. I think even if I had gotten my first job at a fine dining restaurant where I would be making double or triple, I think I would have made much more money because I would have normalized a certain amount of income. Like, humans imprint and we normalize onto things really quickly. So the 7 marks this crossroads energy that I talked about in an earlier episode, this fork in the road where we can go another way. We really can make different choices so that we stop getting stuck in certain loops and create new energetic baselines from an authentic current time place. We'll get stuck in certain loops and wonder why we feel so hopeless. And that sacred pause, whether it's for an hour, a minute, a breath, a month, it can do wonders. We can let go. We can observe what is going on internally. We can change it. We can change then what is happening externally. And then we can respond from a place of clearer energy without so many hooks. A place that resonates with where we'd like to go, not where we've been. I'll ask my students sometimes, like, don't you want better problems, or at least different problems? And again, the answer might be maybe you don't, or maybe you don't right now because you don't have the capacity for something else, you know? That's why I asked, like, is the comfort zone a good place for you for now? Do you just need to hang tight with this job, until you find different housing or you find a new roommate or whatever? You know what I mean? This is about that discernment, right? Because when you're really sick, when you're really chronically ill, you don't want new problems. You don't want to be challenged in a new way. You want ease. You want support because you want to be able to conserve as much energy as possible. So it's not a one size fits all, right? I want to be really clear with that. So yeah, the sacred pause and the 7 of Wands. One way to put the sacred pause into practice easily when you pull that 7 of Wands, also the 7 of Pentacles, I think this is great advice for. Pause and see how far you've come. Count those blessings first before getting swept up in the hooks or the stories or the knee-jerk reaction. That's one way really easily to come into the present moment, is to really see how far you've come, everything you've learned, everything you've been through, how it's made you who you are, and where you're ready to let go of some of that. So name all the ways you've become and maybe name some of the ways you're ready to let go. And then think about What part of you wants to come forth now, either in response to a situation or just to practice a new energetic baseline? Because the Seven of Wands relates to how we are using our fire, how one is running our energy. And there's usually some issue, right? There's normally a clog in the tank, or you're like in between gears energetically or fire-wise, in matters of fire. Like the ego isn't bad. Sometimes, however, the ego is short-sighted. And sometimes the ego has something to prove. And sometimes that needing to prove can drain a lot of energy and get you in some trouble. There's that saying, do you want to be right or do you want to be loved? I think that's one to ask when this card comes up, especially if you're maybe having some relational dynamics happening, that proving energy when it's misguided is not helpful. But sometimes I think the need to prove yourself, when it's to prove yourself to yourself, is gorgeous. Can I write an even more beautiful poem that feels so good in my voice and in my bones to read out loud? Can I write a poem that makes me cry? Can I show up in this way? Can I hold my energetic baseline even though it's hard? Proving in a healthy way, because proving things over and over to yourself builds self-trust. Self-trust builds confidence. Confidence of the best kind, right? The kind that says, I've got my back. I can do this. My creativity has my back. I've got this good friend. They have my back. Not only in one way, but in other ways. Proving over and over in a healthy way provides proof to ourselves. But of course, it's when we solely do things to prove to others where things can go awry. Proving we're a good person, proving we're worthy, proving we can handle whatever treatment someone gives us, proving someone else wrong, right? This is where the sacred pause can help us, because we can just take a step back and think, okay, am I reacting or am I responding from the energy I would like to be in, stay in, and transmit? Listen, I could talk about all of the branches of the tree, but the branch I'm going to spend some time on now is the energy aspect of this. Often when this card comes up, it's time to refine, recalibrate our energy. We started it with the 6. You can go back and listen to the 6 of Wands episode. And in the 7, this energetic process becomes more refined. We can alchemize even more. Resistance often takes up a lot of our energy and a lot of our efforts. Overriding and avoiding our responses that I talked about a while ago, bringing them back, they can often be an energetic drain. Surrender might feel harder, but might really be what is needed. Going for it, taking a risk, might be harder in the short term, but end up much better for us long term. So you have to take a look at how you're running your energy with the 7 of Wands and how much of your energy is in reaction to, right? Reaction to perceived threats, a reaction born from perfectionism, reaction to the perceived reactions of other people. Like, stop the unsanity, y'all. Like a reaction to a reaction to a reaction to a perceived projection reaction. Like, come on, let's just drop it, So you also want to look at what's happening with defensiveness. Are you matching the defensive energy with someone? That's probably not going to work. It's probably not going to feel good. It's also unnatural to your energy to try to contort and to armor. For sensitives, trying to match energy, which is what we do a lot to others, it's exhausting. It's like you're on double duty all the time. You're like reading energy, then matching it, reading, then matching. It's super tiresome because you're not utilizing your own resources and source energy. You're processing other people's energy, which is never useful. And it takes you away from the experience of your true self and the energy you want to be in. The practice of being in the embodied state of energy you would prefer most frequently, that's your frequency. If you want to be in peace or flow or glimmery or hermity, I don't know, like trying to match someone else's energy, it's exhausting and it takes you farther and farther away from your own. It takes you away from your own experience, your own authenticity, and it's a lie. And essentially you're creating like a hollow avatar of an interaction. So breaking the pattern, breaking the cycle, doing that with the sacred pause, coming back to your energy is really important with this piece. And this is one of the ways in which we individuate energetically and creatively and become more of ourselves and live more of our lives authentically. And that process requires our energy. It's also like thinking about where you're allocating that energy, where you're just giving it away, Like one of the lessons from my partner in a really real way, like in a really, really useful way, is where you're giving your power away by like letting your ego be dinged by an offhand remark, right? Like, are you even upset about it? I mean, maybe, but most of the time it doesn't matter, So another lesson of the Seven of Wands is it's more generative to focus on what you are building, on what you love, than what you dislike or the pain when you want to create momentum. Like, for example, I think therapy is wonderful. I think talk therapy is very important. And also sometimes it's useful to take action, or it's useful to put that energy into play and creativity and connection with people and so on and so forth. And that's Seven of Wands right there. So if like your energy is feeding imbalanced relationships, ego dings, frenemies, if it's feeding the past a lot, that's a big one. I know, I'm here too. I get it. That's why present time is so important to be in. If it's getting drained in beliefs and systems that you don't even really believe in, you're not going to have enough energy or capacity to change. So noticing drains, leaks, noticing what your energy truly is doing might be the message of this card. Because where you're going, I'm guessing, requires a different energy than where you've been. And that means you have to utilize and source your energy differently. And that's why I've been so obsessed with energy work, because that's what helps us. So Seven of Wands, cut those cords, examine your sucks and your drains, and start being diligent about your energetic hygiene and your energetic bank. and what feeds your energy and what drains your energy. If this episode was a workshop, we do a lot of activities throughout where you could put this card right into practice directly in your own life. But I already feel like I gave you a ton of examples, a ton of concepts, a ton of practices to try or things to examine. I already can feel you relating VVV hard to at least one of the branches I presented to you, one of the wands I presented to you. So if so, cool. I'm so glad. Cool. Hopefully this episode made this card and the tarot come to life for you more and give you more reassurance, insights, inspiration, and practices you can try. Because remember, you can listen to all the podcast episodes, you can read all the books, but if you don't dig into your life and make some changes and experiment with it and have fun, spoiler, things don't change. But I will end with a practice, a reminder, and some journaling prompts straight from the Seven of Wands. The reminder is that you are more than any mistake, any projection, any dig, any insult thrown at you. The reminder is to let that shit go. Out of your heart, out of your mind, out of your energetic field. Let it go. Let go of the fear. Let go of the self-doubt. Let go of the past. Let go of the worry. And tune back into yourself and your intact, present moment energy. The practice is the sacred pause. Whenever you can, introduce the sacred pause. Whenever you can be conscious enough and aware enough to notice when you're activated, disengage, take a breath, take a beat. You can say, hey, I'm going to need a day or two to think on this. Can I get back to you? And attune with who you want to be for long enough to be able to make a decision from that place. We are turning into a different version of ourselves. We are up-leveling. We are cross-roading. We are off-roading. We are getting in another lane. We're staying in our own lane. These are the sevens, y'all. This is the seven energy, right? So align yourself with where you are going, even if you don't see it yet. You do this enough over and over, a clearing will come. A way will meet you. You'll look down and you'll be like, oh, finally, I'm on a path where I can see where I'm going. And here are the questions you can ask yourself. What is no longer a good use of my energy? What feels like the top 3 best uses of my energy right now? In my life, where might there be spiritual growth spurts in disguise? Or maybe like just some growth, right? Where's there growth that doesn't look like growth? And the last question, in all of the wisdom I shared today, in all of the material you received today, what is the one that feels really interesting, really full of life for you to explore and integrate in your own life? And how will you do that? Write it down, commit to it, try it out, take action on it. In other words, be a change maker and live the tarot. Okay, Angel, as ever, your review is so appreciated. Your share on social or just sharing with friends you think would like this podcast, your shout out, they are appreciated more than you know. It keeps the show going. Your patronage via Patreon is what keeps the show going. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you so much. If you're a weekly listener of the show, if it's taught you and made you cry or laugh or throw your phone across the room or whatever else, and you look forward to it, please consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com/moonstudio, or just give the show some love with a review or a share. Takes 5 minutes, takes 1 second, takes 30 seconds, takes as long as you want it to take. So appreciated. Sending you love. Bye for now.